Literary review. The historical novel Blood, Faith and Freedom is a broad and profound narrative construction about the struggle of an ancient city for justice, about the transformation of simple people into carriers of change, and about the power of moral faith in a world dominated by interests, fear, and injustice. The book follows the fate of the city of Ugarit and its inhabitants in a tense period, in which society is divided between rich and poor, between religious manipulation and spiritual truth, between obedience and courage. From the prologue, the reader is introduced to a dramatic universe, in which the splendor of the temple and the wealth of merchants hide a harsh reality: the exploitation of simple people. The atmosphere is carefully and convincingly built, and the contrast between the opulence of the elite and the suffering of the population creates the tension necessary for a powerful historical story. The author manages to create a credible and symbolic setting at the same time, giving the impression of a living city on the verge of moral collapse. One of the most important strengths of the novel is the construction of the main character, Eliaram. He is not presented as a classic, invincible, or predestined hero, but as a simple, faithful, responsible, and deeply human man. This narrative choice transforms the entire story into a realistic and moving one. Eliaram does not seek power, but justice. He does not seek glory, but balance. It is precisely this modesty that transforms him into a legitimate leader in the eyes of the reader. Eliaram's evolution is gradual and convincing. At first, he is just a voice of compassion in a city dominated by greed. Then he becomes support for the vulnerable. Later he is persecuted, arrested, challenged, and put to the test. In the end, he becomes a leader not through personal ambition, but through the recognition of the community. This transformation is one of the most successful narrative axes of the novel and offers an important lesson about the moral legitimacy of leaders. Another memorable element of the novel is the relationship between Talia and Daniel. Their love story is not only a romantic story, but also a social metaphor. It symbolizes the reconciliation between classes, the rapprochement between different families, and the birth of a new generation that is no longer dominated by the prejudices of the past. Their love is tested by the tensions of the city, social pressures, and the conflict between rich and poor, but it resists precisely because it is built on respect and courage. The novel manages to harmoniously integrate this love story into a broader historical context, without turning it into a superficial or decorative element. On the contrary, their relationship contributes to the general message of the book. Social change begins with changing relationships between people. The character of Baradu, the blacksmith, is also very well outlined. He represents the voice of the workers, of ordinary people who support change through concrete effort. Through his presence, the novel gains social weight and authenticity. Baradu is not only a father and a craftsman, but also the symbol of collective solidarity. Another important merit of the novel is the way in which the institutions of power are presented. The temple, the royal palace, and the councils of merchants. These do not appear just as simple historical settings, but as active mechanisms of influence and manipulation. The author subtly captures the way in which religion can sometimes become a political instrument, and the law can be used against the weak. However, the novel does not reject faith, but on the contrary, it rehabilitates it through the figure of Eliaram and the message of the angel Sariel. This spiritual dimension gives the novel depth and brings it closer to the great classical historical moral narratives. Faith is not presented as a ritual, but as a responsibility. Not as authority, but as an inner light. The famine described in the central chapters of the novel represents one of the most dramatic moments of the action. Here the author demonstrates a good ability to create social and emotional tension. The suffering of the people is not treated superficially, but becomes the catalyst for change. The reader understands that the revolt does not arise from political ambition, but from the need for survival and dignity. An essential moment of the novel is the arrest of Eliaram. This is the point of maximum moral tension. Through this scene, the author shows how fragile justice is when power becomes corrupt. At the same time, the episode highlights the courage of Talia and the solidarity of the craftsmen, preparing the ground for the decisive change that follows. The revolt organized by Baradu and the release of Eliaram mark the beginning of the transformation of the city. It is a symbolic but credible scene, emphasizing the idea that freedom does not come alone. It is won through unity and collective courage. The fall of the conspirators and the removal of the priest Ilabal represent moments of moral purification of the city. These episodes are constructed with balance, without unnecessary dramatic exaggerations. They convey the idea that true change is not revenge, but a restoration of just order. Another strong point of the novel is the abdication of King Amarapi. The author avoids the cliché of the violent overthrow of the ruler and proposes a more mature solution: the conscious renunciation of power. This gesture gives the novel a touch of political and moral depth. The choice of Eliaram as the leader of the city marks the culminating moment of the transformation of the community. It is a symbolic choice. Power passes from the hands of the elite to the hands of responsible people. The chapter about Talia's marriage to Danil is one of the brightest in the novel. It offers the reader an emotional break after the tensions of the conflict and reinforces the message of social reconciliation. The ending of the novel is well constructed and balanced. It is not a spectacular ending in the classic sense, but a mature and reflective one. The city does not become perfect overnight, but it becomes stable, just and united. This narrative choice conveys realism and credibility. The epilogue harmoniously completes the story, showing that true change is sustainable only when it is transmitted to the next generations. Eliaram's story becomes a legend, but at the same time remains an accessible moral model. Thematically, the novel addresses several fundamental ideas: the struggle between justice and corruption, the responsibility of leaders, the role of community, the power of faith, and the importance of solidarity. The title Blood, Faith, and Freedom reflects very well the deep structure of the novel. Blood symbolizes sacrifice. Faith represents the moral foundation of change, and freedom is the final result of the collective struggle. Overall, the novel is a solid, coherent construction, and suitable for readers who appreciate historical literature with a strong moral message. It is a story about the courage of ordinary people and the fact that history is not changed only by kings and armies, but also by awakened consciences. Blood, Faith, and Freedom is, above all, a story about hope. And this is its most lasting legacy.